Hey there, welcome to my channel, Both Things Creative. My name is Zenna and I'm so glad you're here. Let's take a look at today's tutorial on gel plates. So I have been playing with and experimenting with gel plates for a few years now. You can definitely go down some pretty cool rabbit holes learning some advanced techniques, and I'll film some tutorials on those techniques in the future. But today's going to be a straightforward, beginner-friendly video. I'm going to cover some supplies, I'll do a couple demos, comment below with questions, and I would be happy to answer. And if you do end up printing, I would love to see your work. You can also find me on Instagram at Both Things Creative there. So tag me if you pull some prints. All right, so first of all, jelly plate. This is an 8x10 plate that I've used for over a year. They do come, when they're brand new, nice and beautiful and clear, just like that. And they'll get some staining and wear as you use them, but it still works just as well as it did on day one. So gel plate's essentially made out of mineral oil and polymer. They last a really long time. I've heard you can, and some people do, make their own jelly plates out of glycerin, but they don't tend to last very long, maybe a month printing. So these products are really wonderful. They are durable and flexible and fun. Next thing you'll need is a brayer. Brayer is a great way to get a nice smooth layer of paint onto your plate. This one could use a little clean, but it's still gonna work really well for our demo today. Next, acrylic paint. There are all kinds of acrylic paint on the market. I go for some fairly cheap brands, Liquitex Basics Acrylic. There are fluid body and heavy body, and really all of those will work. But I think if you're just getting started, get some basic, inexpensive acrylic paint and just start experimenting and learning. In addition to paint and a brayer, need some texture. Texture can look like all kinds of things. Today I have this lacy kind of paper material I'll play with. This art paper I've used several times, as you can see. It's got a nice grid pattern to it. Egg carton. This is one of my favorite tools. It adds some really neat X's to the plate, which you'll see. Basic stencils. I have a great collection of stencils. I found this multi-use adhesive spreader I'm going to try. It's got some different sized notches on it, and we'll see what that looks like. And then I have an old rag that I'll use to put a little texture on the plate as well. People use hand-carved stamps, flowers, leaves, all kinds of stuff to make imprints on the plate. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of videos all over YouTube on people doing really cool stuff. And like I mentioned, I'll be filming some more videos for you coming soon, so stay tuned. As far as paper goes, as a beginner, I recommend just starting out with copy paper. Some cheap printer paper will do just fine for learning how to use the plate. As you learn more and maybe start pulling prints that you want to use in collage or hang them on the wall in and of themselves, I really like a hot press watercolor paper, about 140 pound, or a Bristol. This is 100 pound. These papers have a really nice smooth surface and a little bit heavier body, so they're acid-free, heavyweight, and are really, really nice for finished works. A couple more things that I just find really useful to have on hand. One is deli paper, and this is really just as it sounds. It's deli paper used in delis to wrap up sandwiches, extremely lightweight, almost tissue paper. But I'll show you how I use that in just a second. And then the other thing, in addition to the pigmented color acrylic paint, I would recommend getting a matte medium, which is basically just acrylic paint without color. It's a clear body acrylic paint. And I'll talk about that, using that in the process as well in just a minute. I'd also like to add that I'm going to include a supply list with links down in the description. So if you didn't catch all of that information, you can download that and take a look at the recommended supplies that way. So let's demo. Okay, here's my work table. And I like to work on what started as a white felt, a white background, because I can see through the plate. I can see the layers as I build them, and it's just easier to work that way. I also like working on fabric because it's easier for me to move the plate if I need to. I have seen people work on a cutting mat or kind of a plastic hard surface, and in my experience, the plate sticks to that surface and it's harder to move, which maybe in their process is a good thing, but I like to work on multiple plates at once and move things around. So personal preference. I also like to have this surface, this fabric nearby because it's where I clean my brayer. Again, personal preference. I tend to maybe work a little messier than some people, but all right, let's go. Okay, let's look at two fairly straightforward ways of getting texture and paint onto the gel plate. On this side, I'm going to lay down my stencil and push paint directly through the image onto the plate. Let's start with black. A little paint goes a long way on the gel plate. You don't want too much or it'll get messy really quickly. But as you practice and play, you'll get the hang of it. Okay, I'm gonna use this nice little brayer here. The link I share on my supply list links to a set of brayers like this. And it's nice to have two sizes, especially kind of when you're working small or working on smaller areas of the plate. Roll the paint right through the stencil. Get a nice even coat. This is where my felt back comes in handy because I clean my brayer just like that. But you know, having an extra piece of paper to do that works well too. Obviously there's some paint still left on that brayer. Okay. Nice. It's one of my favorite stencils. As I'm working, I also like to have an aluminum pan nearby, and I just put a shallow layer of water in there. Then I can throw tools into this as I'm working so that the paint doesn't dry and I don't have to step away from the plate all the time. Okay, so that's my technique number one, basic technique number one with stencils, right? On this side, I'm going to lay down my paint and then use some of my tools to create texture. Again, just a little bit of black paint. Nice even coat. Might even be almost too much. When it's still kind of glossy like that, it's almost too thick. And if you have the felt or the paper, you can always take a little paint off your brayer. Okay, let's start with this cool lacy thing. I'll put that up here. This is where deli paper comes into play. Great way to press texture into the surface of the plate without getting your hands dirty and remove some paint. Just like that. It also creates a secondary print, which is pretty cool. These papers could be used in collage or as wrapping paper. They end up building pretty cool patterns. All right, there's a little bit of texture there. Let's try our egg carton here. Just I'm gonna hold that down a few seconds so that the paint has time to adhere to the egg carton. Okay. Go. And why not one more? Try this adhesive spreader here. Let's do it down here. Looks like the paint is really starting to dry already on the plate, so it's harder to get off, but we'll see how that turns out. Okay. Okay, so one pretty clear, crisp image pushing the paint through the stencil on our right, and then on the left is a little bit more organic, loose texture from multiple tools. And now I'm going to speed this process up by using a blow dryer to dry this layer of paint. Normally you'd want to wait a few minutes, depending on your environment, how humid your studio workspace is. I'd say this would probably be dry in 4 or 5 minutes at the longest, really. But it is nice to have a blow dryer handy to speed that process up. Okay, let's add one more layer of paint before we pull the print. I'm gonna add red oxide. And also, some people will use a palette, right, on the side of their plate, put the paint down on the palette, mix some paint colors there, and then add it to their brayer, and then add it to the plate. Just how I work, I find it easier to add paint directly to the plate and then see how it mixes, because I'm kind of into the whole improvisational, organic feel in most of my work. You'll have to figure out how you like to work and go from there. Now I still have some red oxide on my brayer. I'm going to take a little bit of that off and then see how this goes. Okay. Let's add cadmium red light hue. Okay, I've been talking, so this paint has really started to dry, and I wouldn't want to put my paper directly down on this paint to pull the print, because I don't trust that it is wet enough to adhere to my paper completely across the surface. This is where matte medium is very nice to work with. We can add a layer of paint back onto the surface, wet the surface to pull our print without adding another color. So let's do that. I have a piece of copy paper here, basic printer paper I'm going to use to pull this print. Going to make sure this matte medium is spread across the surface evenly. And without waiting, I'm going to lay my paper down. We want that last layer of paint to be wet so that it has the best opportunity to adhere to your paper. Okay. Some artists will apply weight to the page to make sure that that pressure and contact stays in place the entire drying time. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. Let's go ahead and put a book down for today. Okay, and we'll be back. All right, let's see what we got. I will say the printer paper is really fun to experiment and learn on, but it's not technically built for wet media. So be careful with it when you're pulling it off the plate. If you pull too fast, it really could tear. That's why the thicker paper is nice. I'm already seeing a few spots that are sticking to the plate. Did not completely dry where the paint was a little bit thicker. That's all right. Another nice use of the matte medium is if this happens and say you pull it too soon and a lot of your image is still on the plate, you can put this matte medium down a little bit, roll it over the paint that's left on your plate, put your print right back down and let it dry again. And usually that new layer of paint, once it's dry, will pick up the rest of your image. So it's a nice little tip. So there we go. Demo number 1. Again, we have that pretty well-defined stencil image on the right and organic texture on the left. There's that adhesive spreader where I removed some of the black paint so that we could see our next layer of that red oxide underneath. That lace, the egg carton, and the stencil. So, all right, let's do one more. Might as well talk a little bit about cleanup. Usually there's not that much cleanup with the gel plate, which is wonderful because if you are letting your paint dry completely, all of it's really getting pulled up on your paper, you know? You might get some on the edges here or some little spots like I did. And if that happens, you can either use baby wipes. That's a really quick way to get the paint off the surface of your plate, or an old rag with a little bit of Dawn. That'll do the trick. Again, the plate's fairly durable. You can really scrub it. And that paint comes right off the edges. Just like that. You do want to make sure the surface is dry and there's no soap left on the gel plate after you do your cleanup, or the next time you come to put down your acrylic paint, you'll see it beading up. And if you see your paint beading up, that means you just need to dry your plate more thoroughly. So we're going to do one more demo, but before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about how I think about layering my paint on the plate and composing. The gel plate is one of my favorite tools for just creative play with really no forethought or planning. You can make really cool things just layering textures, adding paint, removing paint. There's, so many fun things to do there. But you might want to get to the point where you put a little bit more thought into how the layers interact, how the colors interact. And when you get there, I've found one tip that has helped me quite a bit. I imagine the gel plate essentially as a piece of glass, and my viewer is on the other side of the glass. And so the first layers I put down on the gel plate are the first layers the viewer is going to see. If I remove them, they will no longer see them. And as I build up the layers, they get farther away from the viewer and really into the background of the composition. So just keep that in mind as we move through the next demo. I'm going to include a simple example of masking, and I think it'll help you visualize this idea a little bit better. So let's go. Masking is essentially blocking off areas of the plate to then reveal later and add new texture or new color to create more interest, more variety in your composition, okay? You can cut shapes. You can use pre-cut shapes. You'll see what I mean. So I have some little pieces of paper here. I'm going to put those down. So essentially that's blocking out these areas on the gel plate. So no paint is going to go down until I peel this up and apply paint in those areas. Let's use this neat stencil and go for blue. Okay. Now, if I had a secondary gel plate over here, I would just flip this right down and put it down like that. And then I'd get the reverse image in blue over on the other side. But that's for another video. Now we want to make sure this layer of paint is dry or those images are going to get blurred, right? So again, with the blow dryer, see if I have any of this aqua green left. I can still see it's a fairly translucent layer of paint there. I could either add more or I can leave it the way it is and decide what my final layer of paint will be and choose something that might interact well with that aqua. But here's where the cool part about the mask comes in. So wherever I've blocked out, I can peel this up. And now I've opened up my window again, and I have an opportunity to add other texture, other color, other design, something new in those areas. Okay, I'm gonna peek around and kind of get a preview for what that's gonna look like. Again, this last layer of paint is fairly thin and translucent, so any paint I add to that, if it's not matte medium, if it does have a pigment and color to it, is going to interact with that blue. So I'm gonna do one more masking and just kind of, this is all experimenting in place, so we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna do one more masking and put this paper that I cut over those spaces so that we can get a little bit better idea of how the next layer of paint is going to interact with that blue. Let's try, we have 2 blues down so far. Let's try a green. Okay. Here's a smaller version of the stencil I used earlier, and I'm going to see how that does here. Let's go complementary. Try a little orange. Okay, that's fairly thick. I'll take some of the paint off of the plate. Okay. Now we're gonna see it through that little window, but we're also probably gonna see a little bit of it through the blue and maybe even the green. We'll see. Just a little bit. All right. Another hit with the blow dryer. And I'm going to pull the whole print with this light coral color. So I'm going to apply this coral to the entire background. I expect it to shift the color of the blue a little bit, maybe even the green, but that's farther back, right, from the front pane of the glass. So we'll see. We'll see. Too much paint. Oops. Well, maybe not. We'll see. I do want that last layer to be nice, even coat, not too thin, not too thick. This actually might be pretty good here. Again, copy paper. We'll be back. Okay, I bet this is dry. Let's see what we get. Pulling carefully. I love when the background color peeks through like that. There's those masked windows. And we got a clean pool today. All right, and we got a clean pool. Okay. Nice. I really like how those colors played together. Okay, so just a quick review. I tore up these little bits of paper and I laid them down first to mask those areas of the gel plate. I put down this stencil and rolled this dark blue paint on first. Behind it, I added the aqua color, and then I laid down the other two masks of the strips of paper, which honestly I'm not sure made a huge difference. You can see a little bit of the line there, but I pulled those up. I added the orange paint, the dark orange. You can also see a little bit of that stenciled design behind the aqua, where it wasn't quite the open area of the mask, but it did layer behind that aqua, which is pretty neat. I like that. I like that effect. And then I covered the entire thing with the light coral, the light orange. And that definitely shifted the blue a little bit. The aqua, it shifted the aqua just a little bit. And then it is the final layer behind the orange, behind everything really. And that's the layer of paint I used to pull up the print. I hope that helps get your head around the idea of masking and the idea of layering. If you have questions, post them below. I really would love to see the prints that you pull. Again, you can find me on Instagram. If you share anything there, please tag me. I'd love to see your work. Let's take a look at some other prints I've done, some ideas for how to use your prints, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so the deeper you get into gel printing, the higher the stack of papers in your studio becomes. And I'm still torn between feeling like I really have to do something with them and just simply enjoying them. So first, I just urge you to enjoy them and have fun. Number one, it's always about the process for me over the product, and simply enjoying the process of creating and making for the process of creating and making. And so that's my wish for you. But you might also want to do things with your prints. So here's some ideas. This was one of our demos. First of all, I embellished it a little bit with a metallic marker, and then I cut it up, and I'm probably going to use it for a collage of some kind. And when I do that, I'll share it with you on Instagram, maybe here on YouTube as well. All of these papers together cut up. I may even combine it with our other demo here, which I also used some metallic pen on. But you could cut up your prints, especially if it's on this thin paper, and collage it onto a thicker paper or onto a birch board or even a canvas. So there's some things to play with there. This was an inkjet print I did for a demo. That reel is on my Instagram if you want to check that out. I think I'm going to turn this into a card for my friend's birthday and maybe trim it down and fold it in half and then write inside of it, kind of like I did this one. This was also an image transfer that I did, and then did some stenciling and pulled the print with that pink color. So greeting cards. Some people are into scrapbooking. You could totally use it for that. Here's just a piece of one that I really like with a little bit of image transfer, stenciling, and color that I'm going to use for collage. This is a large print I pulled off my 16 by 20 plate that I'm saving to use as a background. I really love it. If you can see, there's a little crackling that happened on the plate. I put some metallic pigment in the paint. There's so many possibilities, and I'm really excited to share them with you. So please stay tuned. This is another, I think this might have been one of what I call my junk plates. As I'm working on plates where I'm trying to be more conscious about composition, usually I'll have a plate to the side and I'll just roll my brayer over there or stick a used stencil with some extra paint on it. And eventually those layers that are very random build up. And when the plate is full, then I put that matte medium on the back and I pull it. And it's usually a very interesting background. So we'll see what I do with that. Here's another one I did not too long ago. I actually did this middle piece over a year ago, this transfer, and it didn't transfer completely. I lost a lot of the edges. And so I came back, I masked this area, and I just added the background. And that's another reel I added on Instagram. So go check that out. These are inkjet transfers. Actually, all these images are inkjet transfers. This one I think is done. I really love this one. I'm not sure if I put it up on my website yet or not, but it will be there soon. I'm really into lettering right now. That'll be another video. The lettering was part of the original print. Then I came back and embellished with a little drawing. I added a laser reverse painted image. And then I don't remember if that was laser or inkjet, but I added these two after the fact, which you can continue to build on prints you've already pulled. So keep that in mind. Another inkjet transfer, some lettering. Another one, just kind of organic feel to it. Another background. I don't think this is done yet, but just kind of a random mix of images and stenciling, and we'll see what happens with that. They can definitely be just art in and of themselves. They can be gifts. They can be cards. But really, my message to you is do it for the fun of it. Do it because it is enjoyable. So thank you for watching. I would greatly appreciate you subscribing and hitting that little bell icon so that you're notified next time I upload. And we can continue to build this Both Things Creative community. See you next time.